What would you do if a grown man unleashed a racist tirade at your child 30,000 feet in the air and no one stood up to stop it? Would you stay silent, or would you risk everything to fight back on Flight 327 from Seattle to Washington, D.C., a routine trip for Dr. Celeste Monroe and her 7-year-old daughter, Nyla, turned into a nightmare when a powerful tech CEO launched into a hateful attack against them, and the airline crew turned a blind eye. No one moved until one man did. Elliot Voss, a former Navy SEAL haunted by his past, stood between a little girl and a predator protected by power and privilege. But what began as a confrontation on a plane spiraled into a national scandal, unraveling a network of corruption, racial bias, and algorithmic injustice that went all the way to the top. Could one act of courage expose a system built to silence people like Nyla and destroy those who protect them? Stay with us, because this isn't just a story about a flight gone wrong. It's a story about what happens when the truth finally takes flight. If you believe in standing up to injustice, tap that like button, share this video, and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the powerful journey ahead. The air was crisp and full of quiet energy inside Boston Logan International Airport's Terminal B. The kind of energy that builds in long lines, echoing announcements, and the rustle of luggage wheels dragging across polished tile. For Dr. Celeste Monroe, it was the kind of morning that required more strength than coffee could provide. She glanced down at her daughter. 7-year-old Nyla clutched her stuffed otter in one hand and her boarding pass in the other, her oversized hoodie sleeves almost swallowing both. Her brown eyes were wide, not with fear, but with the cautious wonder of a child used to navigating new spaces carefully. "This is the plane," Nyla whispered. Celeste crouched beside her. "This is the one, baby. Flight 222 to Seattle." Nyla nodded solemnly, like a little general, acknowledging her orders. For most passengers, this was just a long domestic flight. For Celeste, it was a mission. Nyla had been diagnosed with a rare neurological disorder nearly a year ago, and after months of waiting, they'd finally secured an appointment with a specialist at Seattle Children's, one of the only physicians in the country qualified to evaluate the new treatment protocol. Celeste had booked first-class tickets to ensure Nyla's comfort and to keep her away from the general cabin germs and jostling crowds. They scanned their passes at the gate and walked toward the jet bridge. As they settled into their plush seats, row 2A and 2B Celeste gently removed Nyla's hoodie and unzipped her tiny backpack to pull out a sketch pad and crayons. She always traveled with them. Drawing helped Nyla stay calm. Her otter, a scruffy creature named Mo, watched over her lap like a silent guardian. Across the aisle, a man in his late 40s settled into 2C. He wore tactical boots, jeans, and a plain gray t-shirt stretched over a frame that suggested discipline didn't end when enlistment did. A scar cut across his right eyebrow, and his hands resting on his thighs were tanned and calloused. He looked like a man who had spent more time outside than inside. Celeste noticed his calm presence but turned her attention back to Nyla. "Want me to help buckle you in? I got it." Nyla clicked the seatbelt and grinned. "Proud. Doctor, strong girl's ready for takeoff. That's my girl." The intercom crackled as boarding continued. At 2D, a man with perfectly combed silver hair and a $1,000 briefcase was frowning before his feet touched the carpet. Preston Hall. He placed his case in the overhead bin as if he were storing priceless art and not a laptop full of company secrets. With a practiced glance, he took in his surroundings. When his eyes landed on Celeste and Nyla, his lips tightened. Not quite a scowl, more like a question. How did you afford to be here? Celeste returned a neutral smile, polite, measured, the kind black women knew too well. Preston turned to the flight attendant. This isn't the upgraded cabin, is it? It's the Delta One configuration, sir, said Marla Jennings, a flight attendant whose smile broadened the closer she got to Platinum members. You'll still receive premium service. Preston sighed and sat down next to Elliot Voss, the quiet man in 2C. Fantastic, he muttered, ignoring the child giggling with her stuffed animal across the aisle. Celeste pretended not to notice. She reached into her tote and pulled out a plastic baggie filled with pill organizers, just in case the flight became too long for Nyla's little body. Then, as the rest of the passengers trickled in, she closed her eyes for one deep breath. It was going to be a long day. "Excuse me," said a soft voice. It was Elliot. Celeste looked up. "Yes, your daughter's drawing. It's good." He gestured toward the pad, where Nyla had sketched a lopsided airplane with hearts for windows. "Oh, thank you." He offered a smile, small but genuine. "She reminds me of my niece. Same spark." Celeste returned the smile, surprised. "She's the reason we're flying out west." Elliot nodded without pressing further. "Safe journey." Preston scoffed audibly and buried himself in his laptop. The plane door closed. Flight 222 was now sealed in a tube of pressurized air, carrying strangers, stories, and secrets 30,000 feet above any court of law or moral compass. The captain greeted them. Flight time 6 hours and 12 minutes. Turbulence expected over the Rockies. Seatbelt signs on. As the plane pulled away from the gate, Nyla leaned her head against her mother's arm. "Are the clouds going to be soft?" she asked. "The softest," Celeste replied, brushing a curl from her daughter's forehead, like marshmallows made of dreams, across the aisle. Preston Hall rolled his eyes, and Elliot Voss, with hands still and eyes open, felt something shift, not turbulence, not wind, but the quiet thrum of instinct he hadn't trusted in years. Something was about to go wrong. He just didn't know yet how deeply wrong it would go. 30 minutes into the flight, the first signs of trouble were subtle, a barely concealed glare from Preston Hall, an exaggerated sigh as Nyla softly sang to her stuffed daughter, and a pointed press of the call button. Flight attendant Marla Jennings arrived within seconds, her smile wide but tight. "Yes, Mr. Hall. I was under the impression that first class maintained a certain standard of peace and quiet," Preston said, gesturing toward Nyla with a subtle dip of his head. "Children usually sit farther back." Marla glanced at Nyla, who was quietly coloring, and then at Celeste. Her voice was pleasant but evasive. "All passengers are welcome in first, sir. Is there something I can help you with directly?" Preston leaned back, lips pursed. "Coffee, black, no sugar, no noise." Marla turned, her polished shoes clicking softly on the aisle carpet as she disappeared toward the galley. Across the aisle, Elliot Voss hadn't moved, but his eyes were alert now. His instincts, once honed by combat, picked up more than most people ever noticed Preston's contained disdain, Celeste's measured restraint, the way Nyla shrank slightly into her seat. He'd seen these patterns before different players, same tactics. First, you dehumanize quietly, then you escalate. Subtle social weapons, calibrated to test boundaries. Celeste didn't respond to Preston. Instead, she pulled out a small container of mixed fruit from her tote bag and handed it to Nyla with a quiet smile. "Eat slowly," she whispered. "Remember your meds in an hour." Nyla nodded. Marla returned with Preston's coffee, which he took without a thank you. The cabin lights dimmed slightly, and the hum of the engines grew louder as the aircraft descended over the Midwest. Elliot closed his eyes and tried to steady his breathing. Even after all this time, enclosed spaces like this carried echoes. He remembered the feeling of being strapped inside military transport's too many bodies, too much tension, always waiting for something to go wrong. "Mommy," Nyla said softly. "Can I have orange juice, of course?" Celeste pressed the call button. Marla returned. "Yes. Could we have a juice for my daughter?" "Please." Marla nodded, but something in her face shifted ever so slightly, an almost imperceptible delay. "I'll see what I can do." "She's a child," Celeste said, evenly. "Not a stowaway. I didn't say she wasn't, ma'am." Celeste gave a polite smile. The kind women like her were taught to perfect, the kind that held back centuries. When the juice came, Nyla smiled brightly. "Thank you." But the turbulence hit just as she took her first sip. The plane lurched sideways, jolting them all in their seats. And in that moment, Nyla's small hands fumbled the cup. A splash of orange juice arced through the air and landed squarely on Preston Hall's pressed white shirt. Time froze. "What the hell?" Preston exploded, jumping up in his seat as if boiling liquid had hit his skin. Nyla's face went pale, lips trembling. I didn't mean, you little brat." Preston shouted. "Look what you've done." Celeste was on her feet instantly. "Sir? She's just a child. It was turbulence. You people." Preston spat. "Always have an excuse, don't you? I don't care if she's a child or a monkey with crayons, she doesn't belong up here." The slur hit like shrapnel. Across the aisle. Elliot's eyes opened, slowly, fully. The air turned razor sharp. Passengers twisted in their seats. Some leaned in. Some pulled out their phones. Celeste put a hand on Nyla's shoulder. "Sweetheart, it's okay. Don't be scared." But Nyla was already crying, shrinking into herself. "That's enough," Celeste said, louder now. "You will not speak to my daughter that way." Preston turned, red-faced. "Oh, what are you going to do? Lecture me flash your degree? It's a public flight." "Not for long," came Elliot's voice, low and firm. He stood up, slow and deliberate. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't raise a hand. He just stepped between Preston and the child, back away from her. "Now," Preston sneered. "And who the hell are you, Air Marshal Soldier Boy? I can have you removed from every airline in the country with one phone call." "You've already said enough," Elliot replied. Marla came hurrying down the aisle. "Sir, please return to your seat," she said to Preston, but the tone was familiar, pleading, almost apologetic. "Marla," Celeste said tightly, "are you seriously going to let him talk to my daughter that way? I'm sure Mr. Hall didn't mean he called her a monkey," Elliot said, his voice like gravel. The entire cabin fell silent. "Check the video. Half of row 3 recorded it. Go ahead. Check it." Marla faltered. "We'll look into it." "You do that," Elliot replied. "And while you're at it, maybe consider what it looks like when a black child is humiliated in first class and the staff offers her attacker a warm towel and coffee." Preston growled. "This isn't over." "Oh, it's just beginning," Elliot said. He looked down at Nyla, still trembling in her seat, and something inside him clicked into place. He'd once sworn to protect his country. He hadn't realized until today that sometimes the battlefield was 35,000 feet in the air and the ones in danger weren't always wearing uniforms. The air in the first-class cabin of Flight 718 was brittle now, thick with something more than recycled oxygen. It was judgment. It was discomfort. It was fear pretending to be order. Preston Hall had returned to his seat, but not before giving Elliot Voss a venomous glare, the kind that powerful men reserve for those they can't intimidate. Elliot didn't flinch. He stood by quietly as Celeste Monroe gently wiped the sticky orange residue from Nyla's trembling hands. The little girl wouldn't speak. She just stared at her juice-stained dress as if it had betrayed her. Celeste was calm, her voice soft but deliberate. "Nyla, baby, it was an accident. That man doesn't get to decide who you are. You hear me?" Nyla gave the smallest nod. Across the aisle, Preston muttered something under his breath. Elliot heard it. So did the couple in seat 2D. Neither moved. Marla Jennings, the flight attendant, returned again, this time accompanied by a tall, square-shouldered man in a blazer with the Airline's insignia on his chest. "Mr. Hall, Dr. Monroe, sir," Marla began, her tone formal now. "This is Lead Attendant Benjamin Trent. We'd like to de-escalate the situation." There was no situation until he verbally attacked a child. Elliot said flatly. Trent nodded. Understood. "But we have to consider the comfort of all passengers." "You mean his comfort?" Celeste said, "Because I don't remember threatening anyone." Trent hesitated. "We've received complaints." From whom Elliot asked. Trent didn't answer. His eyes darted briefly toward seat 2A, Preston Hall's seat. "We'd like to move your party to a different section of the plane." Elliot stepped forward. "You want to move them after she was harassed and called a monkey?" "That's your solution, sir. I'm trying to keep things from escalating." Trent said, "By removing the victims." Celeste asked, "My daughter's 7. She spilled juice during turbulence. That's not a crime. But being black in first class apparently, and some passengers turned away, others looked straight ahead. One woman clutched her pearls." Preston folded his arms, smirking. "Look," Trent said, lowering his voice, "we just want to prevent further disruption." Elliot's tone hardened. "If you lay one finger on that child, I will file charges the second we land. Try me." Trent looked shaken. "I'm not laying fingers on anyone. I'm asking for cooperation." "Then you're asking the wrong side," Celeste snapped. A flicker of guilt passed over Marla's face. "Ma'am, I'm sorry. I didn't know it got that bad." "You heard the slur," Elliot said. "Everyone did, so don't play innocent now." More whispers rippled through the cabin. And then Nyla whispered, "Why does he hate me?" "Mama." The silence that followed was more damning than any scream. Celeste bent down, her forehead against Nyla's. "He doesn't hate you, baby. He hates the mirror, and you're brave enough to hold it up." Elliot turned to Trent. "Let me ask you something. If I hadn't said anything, if I just watched him shout at a child, would any of this be happening right now?" Trent didn't respond. "That's what I thought." Just then, a sharp chime echoed through the cabin, the captain's call button. Marla answered, speaking softly into the handset, then stiffened. She turned to Trent and nodded once. Trent gave her a puzzled look and headed to the cockpit. Seconds later, an announcement crackled over the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Lawrence speaking. Due to an onboard disturbance, we will be diverting our flight to Chicago O'Hare International. Please remain seated. Flight attendants, prepare for arrival protocol. What the Celeste began. But Elliot's hand gently stopped her. He knew. The diversion wasn't for safety, it was for control. Preston Hall glanced back at them with smug satisfaction. "Are we being removed from this flight?" Celeste asked, turning to Marla. Marla looked sad. "I don't make those decisions, ma'am." Elliot's jaw tightened. "No, you just carry them out." He reached for his phone. "I need to make a call." Marla's eyes widened. "Sir, phones need to stay in airplane mode. This one doesn't." He tapped a small patch on the back of the phone, revealing a secure comm device. Celeste looked up. "What is that backup?" Elliot said simply. "I thought you were retired." "I am. But I didn't retire my principles." As the plane began its descent toward Chicago O'Hare, the first-class cabin was gripped by a tense quiet, the kind of silence that throbbed behind the eyes. A few passengers had slipped on noise-canceling headphones, pretending not to hear, while others exchanged murmurs and glances they thought were discreet. Celeste Monroe kept one hand on her daughter's back and the other in her lap, clenched so tightly her nails left crescent marks on her palm. Nyla had curled up beside her, resting her head against her mother's side. The girl's breathing was shallow, but steady. Her eyes stayed open, unblinking. Elliot Voss didn't sit. He stood in the aisle just beside them, arms folded, posture alert but unthreatening. A retired Navy SEAL learns to read the room, and in this one, he read danger cloaked as procedure. Marla Jennings avoided eye contact as she walked down the aisle performing the standard landing checks. When she reached their row, her gaze flicked toward Elliot, then dropped. She said nothing. "Are they going to arrest us?" Nyla whispered. Her voice barely broke the hum of the engines. "No one's getting arrested," Elliot said. His voice was low, calming, firm. Celeste looked up at him, searching his face. "How can you be sure?" Elliot hesitated. "Because I've seen this play out before, and I've learned that the only way to beat a rigged system is to shine a light on it before it locks the door." He tapped again on the back of his phone. The device had connected to a secure relay. Somewhere on the ground, a signal was bouncing off encrypted satellites to a man he hadn't spoken to in 2 years. Jackson Bell, former intelligence operative and his closest friend from the SEAL teams. Elliot had sent one sentence: "Need eyes on Flight 718. Possible target Celeste Monroe, Muschild, elite tech exec involved." The reply came almost instantly. "Gotcha. Wrote in public and private feeds. What are you walking into?" Elliot typed, "They're diverting the flight. Target may try to disappear her." Seconds later, confirmed. Preston Hall flagged in secure DB. Shell companies linked to Polaris systems. Very dirty money. You're not overreacting. Elliot slipped the phone back into his pocket and returned to his place beside Celeste. "What is this really about?" she asked. Her voice was low, but there was steel underneath. "This can't just be about juice and a bigot's pride." "It's not," Elliot said. "Preston Hall's not just any businessman. His company builds predictive analytics for law enforcement and border agencies, behavioral surveillance, profiling software. Some of it is black box level classified." Celeste blinked. "Are you telling me my daughter splashing juice on a racist triggered a federal incident?" "No," Elliot replied. "I'm telling you, Preston Hall saw a witness he couldn't intimidate and a mother who wouldn't back down. That scares men like him more than anything." A sudden jolt shook the plane as the landing gear dropped. Celeste instinctively reached for Nyla. "Ladies and gentlemen," the captain's voice came over the intercom, calm and official. "We'll be landing shortly at Chicago O'Hare. Local authorities will be meeting the aircraft upon arrival. Please remain seated until further instructed." Celeste exhaled through her nose. There it is. Elliot turned to look behind them. Several passengers had straightened up in their seats. Preston Hall, in 2A, had slipped on a dark blazer and sunglasses indoors. His phone was in his lap, and he was smirking. He knew something. When the plane touched down and began taxiing toward a remote gate, Elliot tensed. "This isn't a standard gate," he muttered. "You know the layout?" Celeste asked. "Better than most," Elliot said. "This is the far side of Terminal G. Cargo access, private transport, executive extractions. They're not bringing the police. They're bringing handlers." The engines cut. A moment later, 2 black SUVs rolled up beside the aircraft. 4 men in suits stepped out, too alert for corporate security, too clean for police. Not a single badge in sight. One of the attendants opened the aircraft door before the seatbelt light was off. A voice spoke from the front. "Dr. Celeste Monroe and Mr. Elliot Voss. Please, come with us." Nobody moved. "Step away from my daughter," Celeste said without raising her voice. The lead man stepped on board. "Dr. Monroe, we are with Federal Aviation Security. We've had reports of a mid-air disturbance and need you to answer some questions." Elliot stepped into the aisle. "Show ID. Now." The man blinked. "Sir, this is not ID," Elliot repeated, louder, his military voice. Reluctantly, the man produced a badge wallet unmarked. No federal seal, no department, a blank triangle with an embedded chip. Celeste looked at Elliot. "That doesn't look federal, because it's not," he said. Suddenly, a chime rang from Elliot's phone. "Jackson again. Confirmed. Those men are private intel contractors connected to Hall's holding firm, but disavowed. Don't go with them." Elliot showed Celeste the message. She nodded once, slow and deliberate. He looked at the men. "We'll be staying right here." "You can't do that." "I think you'll find I can," Elliot said, pulling out his phone and hitting a shortcut. A green light blinked. That signal went straight to Jackson, who would now live stream audio to several allied journalists, civil rights watchdogs, and legal observers in real time. "If you try to remove this child or her mother," Elliot continued, "you will not be operating in the dark. You'll be the headline before your boots touch the tarmac." There was a pause. Then one of the men reached up, pressed his earpiece, and nodded. They turned, left the plane, and vanished into the SUVs without a word. Passengers looked around, confused. Celeste sagged slightly in her seat. "That was close. It's not over," Elliot said, his voice a whisper now. "It's just begun." The plane door finally sealed shut again. Ground crews moved around it in a blur, but inside Flight 718 time stood still. Elliot Voss remained on alert, though his body didn't move. A former SEAL knew how to appear at ease while calculating exit routes, resistance levels, and threats down to the breath. Celeste didn't speak right away. She was watching her daughter Nyla had drifted off in her seat, head resting on her folded arms, cheeks damp but peaceful, as if even her dreams were trying to make sense of what had happened. "I've never felt this visible before," Celeste said quietly. Elliot glanced at her. "You mean vulnerable?" Celeste nodded. "Yes, But not because I'm weak. It's the way people look at you when you stand your ground, like you've disrupted their expectation of silence. That's because silence is comfortable for them, Elliot said. You disrupt that comfort. They start calling you the problem. Celeste turned to him, her voice low but unwavering. They were going to take my daughter, without a warrant, without due process, just vanish us. They were counting on your fear, and mine. Elliot said. The captain's voice crackled overhead. We've been cleared for departure. Next stop, San Francisco. As the plane rolled toward the runway, Elliot's phone buzzed again. From Jackson local journalists caught video of the SUV men, already circulating. One station identified Preston Hall's private security firm, Citadel Prime. The press wants answers. Elliot smiled faintly and showed the message to Celeste. But Celeste didn't smile. We're not safe just because people know. Men, like Hall, don't rely on secrecy. They rely on apathy, distraction. They'll spin this, bury it. Make it about you being a threat or me being hysterical. You're right, Elliot admitted. That's why we control our story before they do. She studied him. Why are you really helping us? Elliot, this isn't your battle. You could have looked the other way like everyone else. Elliot hesitated. Then, 3 years ago, he began, voice rough. I was supposed to escort my niece, Natalie, on her first flight to college. She was like Nyla Smart, wide-eyed, hopeful. She never made it. Celeste blinked. What happened? She was flagged by an algorithm for erratic behavior, probably because she'd changed her travel plan last minute after missing a connection. She was pulled into a secondary screening room, held for hours. No lawyer, no calls. By the time they let her go, she'd missed her scholarship orientation. She gave up and went home, never went back. Celeste sat with that a moment. What happened to her? She teaches music to fifth graders in Ohio now. But every time she hears an intercom chime, she flinches. I'm sorry. I'm not telling you for pity, Elliot said. I'm telling you because when I saw Hall stand up and weaponize his discomfort at a child, I knew I couldn't just watch another girl pay the price for someone else's entitlement. Celeste leaned back, breathing deeply. Thank you, she said, with quiet force. The plane lifted off, engines roaring, San Francisco bound. For a moment, there was only the steady hum of flight and the occasional ding of seatbelt signs. Then, Celeste's phone, still set to airplane mode, flashed with a dozen queued notifications the moment the aircraft hit cruising altitude and Wi-Fi was re-enabled. Emails, messages, voicemails. She opened one. It was from the administrator at her hospital, Dr. Monroe. We've received multiple inquiries from the media about your behavior in flight. Please refrain from public comment until our legal team has reviewed. Another email, this time from the pediatric board where she had recently been nominated for a leadership position. Given the viral attention surrounding the flight incident, we are pausing all discussions of committee appointments pending further clarification. Celeste blinked. It's already started. They move fast, Elliot murmured, reading over her shoulder. Her fingers shook as she scrolled. They're already framing it like I'm unstable, that I made a scene, that my daughter is a disruption. Of course they are, Elliot said, because you didn't follow the script. What script? The one where you apologize for being there at all? Celeste looked at her reflection in the window, worn, resilient, furious. I'm not apologizing. Elliot nodded. Then we fight. Just then. A voice rang out. One of the passengers from economy had approached the front and was speaking to the flight crew, loud enough for others to hear. That woman shouldn't be up here after causing so much trouble. Why are we all paying the price for her drama? The lead attendant, Benjamin Trent, raised his hands politely. Sir, we are doing everything we can to ensure everyone is comfortable. I don't feel safe, the man insisted. Why aren't the authorities removing people like that? A few murmurs echoed in the cabin. Celeste stood up. No, Elliot whispered, but she walked forward anyway, measured, poised. Sir, she said evenly, my daughter spilled a drink. That man called her racial slurs. I stayed in my seat. He stood over a child and shouted. The man narrowed his eyes. There are two sides to every story. Exactly, Celeste replied. That's why I'm making sure mine is heard. If I've made you uncomfortable, that's not an accident. It's a mirror. She turned and returned to her seat. The man said nothing else. A few rows behind him, someone quietly clapped, then another. By the time Celeste sat down again, it had spread, just a few scattered claps. But it was enough. The aircraft cabin, though quiet, was thick with tension more stifling than the pressurized air. Below them, the country turned slowly as the jet sliced across the sky toward California. But above, in the cloudless hush of 35,000 feet, something else had taken flight. The story. Elliot Voss watched the notification stream on his secure app. Messages from Jackson Bell arriving in short bursts, media starting to frame Monroe as uncooperative doctor. Leaked airline statement, we stand by our crew's decision-making under duress. Hall's PR just pushed a story claims CEO harassed mid-flight by aggressive passengers. Elliot showed his screen to Celeste, who skimmed the summaries and set her jaw. They're painting me as a threat, she said. They always start with character assassination, Elliot replied. Make the victim appear unstable so the system doesn't have to answer for anything. Celeste turned her attention back to Nyla, still asleep, unaware of the storm gathering outside the plane. I'm a physician, a mother, a calm person by training and temperament. But I'm not going to let them silence what happened. Elliot studied her for a long moment. Then we're going to need a better weapon than truth alone. He pulled out a small, flat device no bigger than a deck of cards. Jackson calls it a ghost box. It runs VPNs across 5 countries and spoofs locations. We can upload video, documents, even stream live, and it'll take hours for them to trace. Upload what Elliot leaned in. I recorded parts of the incident on a pen camera clipped to my jacket. Not everything, but enough. Enough to show Hall towering over a child, spewing hate. Celeste blinked. You knew this might happen. I knew who Preston Hall was, and I knew if he ever got challenged, he wouldn't go quietly. She swallowed hard. Then let's show people what quiet looks like when it screams. Elliot activated the ghost box and paired it with his camera. We'll cut it down to a minute. No commentary, just visuals, just truth, before he could hit upload. A notification flashed on the aircraft's overhead screens. Breaking federal inquiry launched into mid-air altercation on Flight 718. Unnamed sources claim potential terrorism threat. Elliot's knuckles went white. They're laying the groundwork to paint us as domestic threats, he muttered. Once they invoke national security, due process becomes optional. Celeste's voice was steady. Upload it, now. He did. The footage was grainy but clear. Preston Hall standing, his voice raised, his finger inches from a small girl's face, a clip of Marla Jennings saying, "We'll relocate you immediately." Mr. Hall, while ignoring Celeste's complaint, Hall calling Nyla your kind, and then Elliot's voice quiet but firm. "Step away from the child. Sir, no narration, no music, just reality." They watched as the video pinged across the networks Jackson had seeded whistleblower forums, public accountability platforms, veteran support groups. Within 15 minutes, the hashtags began trending. Wa believe Nyla, Ba Flight 7 Hound Key Incident. Hall exposed. Celeste refreshed her browser and stared. Someone already made a meme, she said with a bitter laugh. It showed Hall's smug face beside the caption, "Don't spill your drink on privilege, it stains." Still, Elliot didn't smile. For every post like that, 10 more will try to spin it. Celeste nodded. "So we keep speaking." But a new threat arrived in the form of an intercom chime and a visit from lead flight attendant Benjamin Trent. "Dr. Monroe. Mr. Voss, can I speak with you in the galley?" His smile was tight, practiced. Elliot rose cautiously. "We'd rather stay seated." Benjamin leaned closer. "It's about a call we received from the airline's legal team. They're ordering us to restrict your communications for the remainder of the flight. Turn off all devices, now." Celeste's brow furrowed. "That's not standard protocol." "Ma'am, I'm just relaying instructions. You're asking us to shut down our ability to defend ourselves while Hall's people flood the media with lies." Elliot said coldly. "No." Benjamin hesitated. "Then we may need to have you detained upon landing." Elliot stood fully, squaring off with him. "You try that. You'll need more than PR damage control. I'll personally brief every veterans organization in the country about what your crew enabled today." The attendant's composure cracked. He backed off. "I'll inform the captain." As he walked away, Celeste turned to Elliot. "You just threatened an airline with a press war. I don't bluff." She looked out the window. The clouds below stretched like fragile glass, untouched. Perfect. "I used to believe systems could correct themselves," she said softly. "I used to teach residents about self-regulating ethics, but I never expected to become someone the system tried to erase." "You're not erased," Elliot said. "You're being seen, and that terrifies them." A passenger in row 2 leaned forward. "I saw what happened," she said quietly. "I'm a teacher. That man Hall was out of control. I've been afraid to speak up, but if you need someone to testify, I will." Celeste met her gaze. "Thank you." Moments later, 2 more passengers passed quiet notes to Celeste and Elliot. Eyewitness accounts, email addresses, offers to help. The flight wasn't just flying, it was shifting. But as they approached California airspace, Elliot received a final message from Jackson Warren. State police units waiting at gate. Possible detainment order issued under Public Safety Clause. Orders coming from above. Be prepared. Celeste looked at her daughter, now stirring, rubbing her eyes as if emerging from a world safer than the one they were about to land in. "She doesn't even know what's waiting for us," Celeste whispered. "She will," Elliot said, "and she'll know we never backed down." The plane began its descent, and the war for the truth was just beginning. The plane touched down at Los Angeles International Airport with a jolt that seemed more symbolic than mechanical. The silence that followed was pierced only by the screech of tires on asphalt, an echo of the tension inside the cabin. Nyla gripped her mother's hand, sensing the shift. Her eyes darted to the window where flashing red and blue lights glared like warning signals in a storm. Why are there police cars? Mommy, she asked. Celeste forced a smile. Just airport security. Sweetheart? Standard when something unusual happens on board. But nothing was standard about what waited on the tarmac. 4 uniformed airport officers, 2 state police cruisers, and a plain black SUV had gathered just beyond the jet bridge. As the aircraft taxied into position, Elliot Voss peered through the window and muttered, "That SUV, that's no TSA vehicle." Celeste nodded tightly. "They're here for us." Flight 718 rolled to a stop. A mechanical hiss followed as the cabin doors unlocked. Marla Jennings stood at the front of the plane, radio pressed to her ear, pale beneath her makeup. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, "please remain seated while we allow select passengers to disembark first, per airline protocol." Everyone knew what that meant. Celeste turned to Elliot. "If they separate me from Nyla, they won't. I won't let them." She squeezed Nyla's hand. "No matter what happens, I want you to stay close to me, just like when we crossed the street in New York. Eyes on me?" "Okay." Nyla nodded, wide-eyed. As officers boarded, the cabin fell deathly quiet. Cameras came out, passengers ready to record, emboldened by the viral video from earlier. It was no longer just about what happened on the plane. It was about how the system reacted now that the world was watching. A state trooper with a square jaw and buzzed hair approached Celeste. "Dr. Celeste Monroe." "Yes." "We have orders to escort you and Mr. Voss for questioning regarding an in-flight disturbance." "I'm a mother," she replied calmly. "My daughter is coming with me." "That's not," before he could finish. Elliot stepped forward. "We're not resisting, officer, but this child is a minor with a medical condition. If you separate her from her guardian, you'll be facing a PR crisis far worse than the one you're already in." The officer hesitated, glancing at the recording phones, the expectant faces, then he nodded. "Fine. But she stays close." As they were led down the aisle, scattered applause broke out, hesitant at first, then stronger, a show of solidarity from the passengers who had witnessed enough to know right from wrong. One woman stood and spoke aloud. "That man, Preston Hall, he threatened that little girl. We all saw it. Don't let them rewrite what happened." Another voice. "We've got footage too. We're not deleting it." Celeste's heart thudded, not with fear but with something more dangerous hope. In the terminal, they were met by a tall woman in a charcoal suit who introduced herself as Agent Dana Kim from the Department of Transportation's Office of Security Compliance. "We're conducting an internal review," she said. "You're not under arrest, but we need to understand the events on board." Elliot raised an eyebrow. "And are we being recorded?" "You are now," Dana said, hitting a button on a lapel cam. In a stark conference room with blinds drawn tight against the terminal lights, they were seated at a table across from 3 officials, Agent Kim, a representative from the airline's legal department, and a Department of Homeland Security liaison. It felt less like a debrief and more like a chess match. "Dr. Monroe," Agent Kim began, "can you walk us through your version of the events on board?" Celeste exhaled slowly. "There's no version. My daughter spilled juice on Mr. Hall during turbulence. He responded with a racial tirade that escalated to physical intimidation. Were there any provocations from you?" "None. I offered to pay for his cleaning. I asked him to stop using hate speech." The airline representative interjected, "We've received a statement from our lead attendant describing Mr. Hall as visibly upset but non-threatening. "That's a lie," Elliot said, voice controlled but steely. "And it contradicts multiple eyewitness accounts and a viral video now viewed by nearly 4 million people." Kim looked at him. "And your role in this protecting a child? That's it." Celeste reached into her purse and pulled out a folder. "These are statements from 6 passengers offering to testify, including a teacher who confirmed hearing Mr. Hall call my daughter a monkey. I suggest you read them." DHS flipped through the papers, jaw tightening. "We've also reviewed social media." Agent Kim said the narrative is unfavorable to the airline. The airline rep's smile thinned. "Which is why we're conducting our own investigation." And in the meantime, Celeste asked, "Are you detaining us, charging us, taking my daughter away?" There was a long pause. Agent Kim leaned forward. "No. For now, you're free to go, but we strongly advise laying low. The media frenzy is only going to escalate." Elliot stood. "So, you're releasing us not because it's right, but because it's politically inconvenient to do otherwise." "I didn't say that," Kim replied. "You didn't have to." Back in the terminal, Jackson Bell appeared from the crowd like a ghost materializing from mist. "You've got 24 hours max before Hall's people shift tactics again," he said under his breath. "There's a hotel under an alias. My guy will drive. Phone's off. We need to move." As they left the terminal, Jackson handed Celeste a burner phone and an envelope. "What's this?" she asked. "Hard copy of the leak we were waiting for." He said, "Financial documents. Hall's company has contracts with multiple law enforcement agencies, and we found email traffic between him and the FAA about influencing incident reports." Celeste stared at the envelope. "He's not just rich, he's embedded." Jackson nodded. "And now, you're not just a victim, you're a threat." The hotel room was sparse white walls, muted curtains, and a single lamp casting long shadows over the cheap wood furniture. But, for now, it was sanctuary. Nyla curled up under a blanket on the bed, watching a cartoon on mute, her small face lit by flickers of color. Celeste sat nearby, laptop open, the contents of Jackson's envelope spread before her tax records, emails, shell company names, and line items that linked Preston Hall's business empire to government contracts across multiple sectors. Elliot stood by the window, watching the parking lot. "Nothing yet," he said without turning. "No tales, but I don't like how quiet it is." Celeste's brow furrowed. "This email, look." She tilted the screen toward him. It was a scanned thread between Preston and a Department of Transportation official. In it, Hall had referred to a troublesome mother and requested a procedural review that ensures compliance across all passenger levels. "Jesus," Elliot muttered. "He's not just trying to punish you. He's trying to create a precedent." "Exactly," Celeste replied. "This isn't about me. It's about making sure people like me don't speak up again." There was a knock on the door. 3 short, 2 long Jackson's code. He entered briskly, carrying a portable hard drive. "It's time," he said, dropping it on the table. Celeste looked up. Time for what Jackson tapped the drive. "Meet Jordan Reyes, former compliance officer at Stratnet Dynamics Hall's data infrastructure partner. He contacted me anonymously. Says he has evidence of algorithmic bias in their surveillance software. And he's ready to talk." Elliot narrowed his eyes. "Why now?" "Because he's seen the video," Jackson replied, "and he's seen the backlash. People are listening. It's his best shot to expose them before he gets buried. Where is he? En route to a safe house in Anaheim, but we'll need to move fast. They're already trying to shut him down. Celeste looked at the documents again. This is bigger than just racial profiling on a plane. These systems, they're designed to feed into law enforcement databases, to flag potential threats using coded bias. Elliot sat down across from her, and once someone's flagged, they're marked. She finished, tracked, stopped, searched sometimes worse. A silence settled over them. Then Elliot spoke, voice low. I keep thinking about Sophia. Celeste looked at him. She was my daughter. Would have been 12 this year. Died during a wellness check. Officers said she matched a description from a neighborhood alert. An alert generated by an algorithm. Celeste's breath caught. I never got justice, Elliot said. They erased the body cam footage, said the data corrupted. I tried everything. But the system isn't built for the truth. It's built to maintain itself. Celeste leaned forward. That's why you stood up for Nyla, isn't it? He nodded, slowly. She reminded me of Sophia, the same way she lit up when she talked about animals, same way she flinched when someone towered over her. Celeste reached out, her fingers gently touching his. I'm sorry, Elliot, for everything you've carried alone. I'm not alone anymore. The moment was broken by Nyla's voice. Mommy, look. She held up a drawing Preston Hall with his angry red face shouting across the aisle of the airplane. Beneath it, she had drawn her mother and Elliot standing protectively in front of her. You drew this from memory, Celeste asked. Nyla nodded. I don't want to forget what he did. I want people to know. Elliot's jaw tightened. She's braver than both of us. Jackson was already connecting the hard drive to a secure laptop. We can't wait. If Jordan's intel checks out, we leak it. Wide. All platforms. We won't get another shot. But what about Nyla? Celeste asked. We're already on borrowed time. If we go public again, she'll be a target. Jackson hesitated. You're not wrong, but if we don't hit back hard, they'll control the story. They'll frame it as one angry woman, one disgraced veteran, and an unfortunate misunderstanding. We need to blow it open. Celeste stood, pacing now. The weight of her decision pressed on her chest like a hand too firm to ignore. She thought of the protest signs with Nyla's face, of the messages she'd received, some hateful, many grateful. She thought of every patient she'd ever treated, every child with a future worth fighting for. She thought of the boy arrested in her neighborhood for walking home too late, and the father fired for causing a scene at a school board meeting. Then she stopped pacing. Her voice came quiet but firm. Leak it. Jackson's fingers flew over the keyboard. Elliot grabbed his coat. I'll scout the perimeter. Wait, Celeste said. There's something else. She pulled out a letter and email from the hospital board, time-stamped that morning. It's an emergency disciplinary hearing, she said. They're reviewing my medical license. Elliot looked at her. You think it's connected? It's too perfectly timed not to be. And if I lose my license, Nyla loses access to treatment. They'll freeze my insurance, discredit me professionally. It's all part of the same strategy. Jackson cursed under his breath. Then we get ahead of it, Elliot said. We leak everything, not just the racism, not just the tech, the retaliation, the whole damn strategy. Celeste exhaled. It's time people saw what power looks like when it's threatened. She walked over to Nyla and kissed her forehead. We're not just surviving this, she whispered. We're going to change something. The video leaked just before sunrise. At first, it was a quiet Ripple Reddit, Twitter, a few dark web forums, but within the hour, it became a surge. A former compliance officer with receipts, a mother accused, a child traumatized, a Navy SEAL stripped of his peace, and at the center Preston Hall, caught on tape dehumanizing a child and unleashing a web of digital persecution to silence his critics. By noon, hashtags were trending. Justice for Nyla, Preston Hall exposed, surveillance racism, Celeste did nothing wrong. Within 6 hours, the video had been downloaded 3.2 million times. Dozens of independent journalists began cross-referencing the documents and Jordan Reyes. His testimony about the biased algorithms was being quoted on CNN, Vice, and NPR. But for every wave of validation, there was an undertow of retaliation. Celeste's phone buzzed, a private number. She didn't answer. Then Jackson's burner rang. "It's Agent Kim," he said, answering with caution. Dana Kim's voice was tense. "You're in more danger now than you were on the plane. Preston's gonna burn every bridge to bury you." "We're used to fires," Jackson replied. Dana ignored the jab. "He's pushing a full legal and media counteroffensive. He's activated assets across media outlets and regulatory boards. He's also frozen Reyes's bank accounts." How Celeste asked, incredulous. Shell companies, influential donors. He doesn't just control the message, he controls the levers. "You have maybe 24 hours before a federal injunction is issued against you for data theft and coordinated defamation." Elliot swore under his breath. "We'll go public," Celeste said. "Interview, documentary, whatever it takes." Dana's voice dropped. "There's something else. They've released your sealed custody files, your late husband's military discharge, your sealed therapy records. They're painting you as unstable, a mother on the edge." A heavy silence followed. It was Elliot who finally asked, "How did they get sealed records? They've hacked your cloud accounts, possibly the hospitals, and you have a mole." That word hit like a bullet. Celeste leaned against the dresser, heart racing. "Someone we trusted." Dana didn't answer directly. "You need to go dark, now." She hung up. Jackson was already moving. "Grab everything. We shift locations. But how do we keep the pressure on?" Celeste asked. "You already did," Elliot said, watching the TV. On screen, a CNN anchor spoke urgently. Preston Hall's empire may be facing its biggest challenge yet, as evidence mounts connecting his surveillance systems to systemic racial discrimination. But even as the world began to shift, Celeste was unraveling inside. That night, in the safety of their third motel in 2 days, she sat at the edge of the bed, her hands trembling over Nyla's sleeping form. She whispered, "What if they're right, Elliot?" Sitting on the windowsill, didn't answer immediately. He knew better than to give easy reassurances. Instead, he asked, "About what? That I'm unstable, that I've lost perspective, that I'm dragging my daughter through something I can't win." He stood and crossed the room slowly, crouching to her level. "You want to know what I think?" She nodded, afraid to meet his eyes. "I think you're exhausted, grieving, and terrified. And still, you stood between a racist billionaire and your child. Still, you fought back when they tried to erase your name. You are the most stable thing in her life." Celeste turned to him. Her voice was barely audible. "I didn't protect her well enough. She recorded the first video because she was scared I wouldn't remember. She recorded it, Elliot said softly, because she believed in you and in herself. That's not failure. That's legacy. Celeste didn't realize she was crying until Elliot handed her a tissue. You're not the only one questioning everything, he admitted. When I grabbed Hall on that plane, I didn't just see a rich bully. I saw the guy who might have killed Sophia. That's not healthy. That's trauma. He paused. But you know what's worse than being afraid of our own pain? Pretending we don't have any. You and we don't get to choose how we got here, but we do get to choose what we do next. At that moment, Jackson burst into the room. They're here. Elliot was on his feet instantly. Hugh Jackson tossed a tablet onto the bed. It showed drone footage, black SUVs, tactical personnel in unmarked gear, approaching the motel, private contractors. Jackson said, not police, not military. They're not coming to arrest you. They're coming to erase you. Celeste's blood ran cold. How long? 10 minutes. Max. Jackson handed her a go bag. We have a backup route, but there's a risk. What one of us won't make it out. Elliot looked at the feed again, then back at Celeste and Nyla. I'll stay, he said. No, Celeste snapped. You've done too much. You're not sacrificing yourself for me. Elliot held her gaze. I'm not sacrificing anything. I'm choosing what matters. You and Nyla get to the media. Get to the people. Finish this. Jackson nodded. There's a bike in the alley. It'll buy us time. We'll loop back in 48 hours. Celeste hugged Elliot tight, a goodbye wrapped in gratitude and fear. You come back to us. He smiled, worn, weary, but unshaken. That's a direct order. Damn right it is. The sun was rising behind gray clouds when Celeste and Nyla pulled into the back lot of a small independent media studio in Salt Lake City. Inside, the studio buzzed with urgency. Mic checks, light rigs, camera crews. It wasn't network news, but it was trusted. Real journalists. Real risks. They had 20 minutes before going live. You sure about this? Jackson asked, scanning the perimeter through polarized lenses. No, Celeste admitted, but it's the only thing I haven't tried. She looked down at Nyla, seated cross-legged in a quiet corner of the green room, doodling on a clipboard. The child's resilience was awe-inspiring, but her eyes were shadowed. There was an awareness there, now, that had replaced innocence. Celeste turned to Jackson. Is there still no word from Elliot? Jackson shook his head grimly. Not since he diverted the contractors. But his GPS beacon went dark in a controlled pattern. It means he planned it. Celeste closed her eyes and drew a slow breath. She knew Elliot well enough to read his silence. He was alive. But protecting them came first. A producer knocked gently on the door. Dr. Monroe, we're ready. Celeste took Nyla's hand and walked onto the set. The host, Simone Carter, greeted her with warmth and gravity, an award-winning journalist known for exposing government overreach. Simone had gone public 2 years earlier about her own experiences with racial profiling. She didn't offer small talk, only a respectful nod. The lights brightened. The countdown began. 3, 2, 1. Simone turned to the camera. Today, we speak with Dr. Celeste Monroe, a pediatric neurologist whose first-class flight to Portland became the flashpoint for one of the most explosive civil rights stories in recent memory. Celeste nodded. Thank you for having me. Simone leaned in. What happened on that flight, Celeste didn't hold back. She detailed Preston Hall's verbal abuse, the flight crew's complicity, the aftermath being detained, framed, targeted. She spoke of Elliot's intervention, of Jackson's underground support, of Reyes's whistleblowing, and, most of all, of Nyla's fear. Marla Jennings, the senior flight attendant, testified under immunity. She carefully avoided mentioning Preston Hall's slurs. He was upset, Marla said, but it never escalated beyond a verbal disagreement. "Did you hear any racial language?" Drake asked. "I don't recall," she said. "Liar," Celeste thought, but she didn't flinch. Next, the defense called Jordan Reyes. He spoke clearly, clutching a flash drive in his palm. "I was compliance director at Meridian Air's parent company. I witnessed firsthand the suppression of evidence in this case, flight logs, passenger statements, security protocols overridden for VIP protection. They prioritized platinum loyalty over a child's safety." Drake objected, claiming hearsay. Sarah stood firm. "He's not making accusations. He's reading from internal memos." Judge Marsh allowed it. Then came the bombshell. A subpoenaed FAA representative, Agent Dana Kim, took the stand and confirmed the existence of a now declassified internal video feed from Flight 921. She had seen the footage, and she'd brought it. "I reviewed the original cabin video," Agent Kim said calmly. "It matches the child's recording. Mr. Hall did, in fact, call the girl a monkey and threatened her verbally." A gasp rippled through the room. The prosecution tried to suppress the video, citing chain of custody concerns. Judge Marsh ruled this court will view the footage. The screen flickered on, and there it was. Nyla, cowering, Preston Hall, standing, snarling, Marla Jennings looking away, Elliot Voss stepping in, Celeste shielding her child, no edits, no AI, just truth. When the lights came back on, the courtroom sat in stunned silence. Drake scrambled to regroup. He pivoted to Elliot, now classified as a fugitive. "Doctor, Monroe collaborated with a violent man, ex-military, known for PTSD. Celeste stood with respect. Your Honor, may I speak?" Judge Marsh hesitated, then nodded. Celeste turned not to the judge, but to the jurors, ordinary people who had just witnessed the fear in her daughter's eyes. "I didn't set out to defy authority," she said. "I begged for help. I filed complaints. I followed procedure. But the moment my daughter was seen as a problem rather than a person, everything changed." She paused. Her voice trembled now, but not from fear, from something deeper. "I'm not perfect. I've made mistakes, but protecting my child is not one of them. When systems fail, we don't just break the rules, we break the silence." Then she said something that stopped the room cold. "They're still looking for Elliot. But you should know he didn't run from justice. He ran to protect it, and he may have saved your daughter, or your niece, or your neighbor's child by saving mine." Drake asked no further questions. He knew the narrative had turned. In the final arguments, Sarah closed with a quiet fury. "This is not about legality. It's about morality. The law, when applied unequally, becomes a weapon. And Dr. Monroe stood unarmed in the middle of a storm, with only one shield her courage." The jury was dismissed. Deliberations began. Outside, thousands had gathered, watching live streams, holding signs, chanting Nyla's name. Inside, Celeste sat alone, remembering Elliot's voice. "You can't silence truth forever, not if you plant it deep enough." 2 hours later, the jury returned. Foreman stood. "We, the jury, find the defendant." The room held its breath. not guilty on all counts. A cry escaped from the back of the courtroom. It was Jackson. Judge Marsh banged her gavel, but the moment had already erupted. Celeste didn't cry. She just nodded. Once, outside, the crowd roared, but the war wasn't over. That night, news broke that Elliot Voss had been located alive, but imprisoned offshore under a Black Ops provision. No charges, no trial. Celeste knew the system had lost a battle, but it wasn't retreating, and now they had to get Elliot back. It was nearly midnight in Washington. D.C. The rain fell in steady sheets, softening the neon buzz of streetlights. In a safe house 10 blocks from Capitol Hill, Dr. Celeste Monroe stood by a window, clutching a mug of lukewarm tea. Nyla slept in the next room, curled in blankets, one hand still grasping a drawing of Elliot with wings. On the wall across from her, 6 screens glowed with encrypted calls, news alerts, and security camera feeds. Jackson Bell sat at the table surrounded by digital maps and intel briefings. "They moved him," Jackson said quietly. "Elliot's no longer in international waters. He's back on U.S. soil, transferred to a black site in Nevada off the books. If we're going to get him out, it's now or never." Celeste's fingers tightened around the mug. "They're still punishing him," she murmured, "even after everything." Hashtags like DACA Free Elliot and Jock Justice can't be classified trended worldwide. In the temporary court building, Sarah Layton approached the bench with resolve. "Your Honor, Mr. Voss is being held without charge under an expired provision. This violates not only domestic law, but the Geneva Conventions." The judge was younger than most, Hispanic, sharp, sympathetic. The Department of Justice has 24 hours to produce Mr. Voss or explain the basis for his detention. In a black van outside the courthouse, federal agents whispered into radios, back at the safe house. Jackson stared at screen logs. They're considering extraction. Not legal, physical, they're scared. Celeste sat down beside him, her voice steady. "Then, let's make it clear. If they disappear him again, they do it in front of the entire world." That night, she walked up the courthouse steps holding Nyla's hand. No disguises, no hiding. Press flooded the street. Cameramen shouted questions. Celeste didn't speak,